Hello and welcome to See You in Court, a podcast that informs you about the Georgia civil justice system, what it means to you, and how it protects individual rights. During each episode, we dive deep into stories, cases, and insights that matter to Georgians. You can learn more on our website at www.seeyouincourtpodcast.org. Join the conversation on our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast, and stay connected with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/seeyouincourtpodcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Your hosts are Robin Frazer Clark and Lester Tate, who are both past presidents of the State Bar of Georgia and who both serve on the board of directors of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. And now this episode of See You in Court.
Good morning, friends and lovers of the law, and welcome to See You in Court. I am Robin Frazer Clark, and with us here today, as usual, is our co-host, Lester Tate. Hey, Lester, how are you?
Morning. How are you? How are you, Robin? We're actually morning. You know, I said some of we always say good morning, even when we're in the. We're actually in the morning, and it's a nice, crisp fall football-like weather out there.
Right, and we've just been talking about some wonderful football games that we watched this weekend, and Georgia won.
More wonderful
Vanderbilt
for the Georgia
won.
fans than for the Tech fans like me, but still, it was a great. You know, it's hard to have a bad day watching football, in my opinion.
It really is. And I and my family were in Austin, Texas to watch the great UGA football game Saturday night. And what a game. It was just so much fun to be there, and go Dogs.
Well, I went to the Mercedes-Benz to see my alma mater, Georgia Tech, play Notre Dame. And it was just a great first half of the first quarter. We took the lead 7-0, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
The rest of it, maybe not so much, but still, It was a lot of fun.
Sounds good. Well, today we're going to be talking about divorce, and our friend Bill Gentry, who's a divorce lawyer, and his new book that he's authored, I Want Out, and really interesting book, and it's a beautiful book too. I love the way this looks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let me introduce Bill to our listeners. William C. Bill Gentry is founder of the Gentry Law Firm in Marietta, Georgia. He's been practicing law in Georgia since 1986. His primary focus is divorce and family law cases, including high asset property division, child custody, and alimony. Bill has tried hundreds of cases in state and federal courts throughout Georgia and dozens of appeals in both state and federal appellate courts in Georgia. He is admitted to and has argued in the Georgia Supreme Court, the Georgia Court of Appeals, and the 11th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in Atlanta. Bill received his BA from the University of Virginia in 1981 and received his JD, Juris Doctor, from the University of Georgia in 1986. Bill is a past president of the Cobb County Bar Association. He served on the Board of Governors of the State Bar of Georgia since 2012 and is now the treasurer of the State Bar of Georgia. He is now also the author of this new book, I Want Out, A Woman's Guide to Finding Peace Through Divorce. That answers many questions about divorce, and we're going to explore that with Bill today. Bill, welcome to the show.
Robin, Lester, it's great to be with you guys.
Glad to have
Bill, I had forgotten that you were our current state bar treasurer. I served a sentence of 2 years as state bar treasurer before, and that's not always an easy task either.
You had 2 years, okay? Hopefully,
and it used to be, it's no. Actually, I may be the last person to actually get reelected treasurer instead of just elected. People used to didn't switch from one to the other on the road to maybe being president. So, and it's, I was always kind of sad because, it's hard to screw up taking the role, but you can lose $1 million just like that, through some faulty investment. So kudos to you for doing that job.
Well, I have to confess, I don't have to go to the state bar and physically sign checks. It's just an app I open up on my computer, so I can spend millions of dollars in just a few minutes.
That's great. That's correct.
It's a big job too. Now we have 55,000 attorneys in the state of Georgia, which is kind of mind-boggling to me, but it's no small, it's a large corporation basically that you're helping to run. So and I know Lester and I both know it takes a lot of time out of your practice. So we appreciate your willingness to do that and serve the state bar. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit first, Bill, before we get into your book. A little bit about your career. I just told the listeners a little bit about it. You've tried hundreds of cases. You've now basically an expert in divorce and family law. Tell us about your path. How did you get into that?
Well, it's interesting because I graduated from Virginia in 1981, which was decades ago. I went to Washington, D.C., kind of like Lester, worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years for Wyche Fowler when he was in the House. And what I saw there is the ability of lawyers to make a difference. Wyche Fowler was a lawyer. Most of the folks we worked with were lawyers. And I decided I wanted to go to law school. And my father was a lawyer. My mom's dad was a lawyer. So I went to Georgia Law School, got out in '86, and went to work for Hal Daniel, another past president of the State Bar of Georgia. And he helped instill in me the importance of being a servant leader. I got very active in the Cobb County Bar Association beginning in 1990, and just decided that I really needed to kind of step into state bar leadership when that opportunity came about. But my years with Webb and Daniel, Hal Daniel's firm, we did a lot of complex business litigation. And that really has positioned me well for an aspect of divorce cases that a lot of folks don't have the experience with. And that's because so many of the high asset divorce cases deal with small or medium-sized businesses. And I've got the tools and the training to be able to plow down into these and understand what's going on, to find out if assets are hidden, and to trace and get the forensic experts involved, get the business valuators involved so that we can kind of really see what's going on.
I dabbled in domestic relations maybe 30 years ago and gave it up and have not regretted, for me at least, working in other stuff, but I've gotten pulled back in occasionally through a referral or something to, sometimes as a local counsel, usually is what it is for somebody that's got a divorce. And I think when I have popped back into a case, usually just for something that involved trying it or trying to settle it or something like that, I was shocked at the number of outside experts that are now used in divorce cases, forensic accountants, to trace stuff down, business valuators, guardian ad litems for custody, and psychologists and counselors and co-parenting and all that. And that's really changed divorce practice, hasn't it?
It really has, and it can drive up the cost of divorces so often. When I first started, I did a little bit of family law in the late 80s, but in 1990, I moved out to Marietta, and I started practicing with a fellow whose dad had been a divorce lawyer before he went on the bench. And my partner didn't really enjoy family law, so I started getting just a torrent of referrals for family law cases. But in the early 90s, judges had enormous discretion as to almost any aspect in a family law case. And over the years, the General Assembly, for better or for worse, has set up more and more guardrails as to what can be done, what should be done. And you see more and more family law cases overturned on appeal because, for example, the child support worksheet wasn't properly filled out. A parenting plan wasn't properly filled out. The marital balance sheet didn't add up right. The domestic relations financial, all of these things which didn't exist when I started doing this in the early 90s. But, do we get a better result? Yes, we do. Because what I tell my clients is what often drives the cost of a divorce case is getting more information, higher and higher quality information. Do you want to just exchange interrogatories and document requests? Do you want to really take depositions? Do you want to bring in the forensic accountants and the business valuators? You can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars pretty quickly.
And it sounds like that especially in the kind of cases you handle, that an expert's going to be in every case. You're going to have to hire an outside expert which is costly. I do a lot of med mal, so I hire physicians, but accountants, I'm sure, are pretty expensive as well.
Well, in your med mal cases, I'm sure you have to, if it's a death case, you have to kind of help have experts come in and help figure out the value of the life and all of these things, or a catastrophic injury, a day in the life kind of videos and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to before the Georgia Civil Practice Act was put into place in 1966, and a lot of trials were just trials by ambush. And what would happen? You don't know. You show up, and then you've got to be ready to dance.
Got to wing it.
That's right.
And I know we've probably all heard the old joke, but doing with a family law lawyer like you on here, it wouldn't be right for us to have the podcast and me not to tell it. But the guy who comes in and the divorce lawyer quotes him a fee, and he says, "That's really expensive." And the lawyer says, "Yeah, you know why?" And he goes, "No, why?" And he says, "Because it's worth it." And
yes.
And that probably, when you the title of your book, "I Want Out," there are people where the past has been intolerable, the present's intolerable, and it's going to be intolerable for the future. And it's worth it, for them to get out, to pay these experts, to get a new life, if you will.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Bill's new book, I Want Out, A Woman's Guide to Finding Peace Through Divorce. And I'm showing it because we have a Facebook, is it Facebook? No, YouTube.
YouTube.
I'm getting the social media mixed up, Lester. Sorry. But this will be on YouTube too. So this is this beautiful, I love the artwork, Bill. And it's throughout the book, which I love. But it's from a woman's perspective. Tell us about that. Do you represent women more than men?
Well, probably 60-40 women versus men. One thing I try to make clear, and I've had a couple of men come in and say, "I saw this book," and there are women who are narcissists too. And just in my experience, there are a whole lot more men who are. And so it could go either way. And I could tell you stories, till the end of time. But let me tell you, I don't like bullies. I really don't like bullies. And even before I became a lawyer, I recognized a lawyer's ability to protect the weak from the strong. Okay. I mean, the strong don't need help. The weak do. And by weak, you don't want to be demeaning or derogatory, but it's true. It's the people who are the victims, but why is a man writing a book about women going through divorce? Well, I have spoken with thousands of women over the years about what they've gone through. I've actually had a few say, they'll start a thought and I'll kind of complete it. And I'll say, "Are you reading my mind?" I said, "No, I'm not reading your mind, but listen, I've heard this story so many times."
Mm-hmm.
You go to work every day, you work hard. After you get the kids up, get their breakfast, get them to school, you go to work all day, you come back, you're exhausted. The last thing you want to do is have your husband yelling at you. Okay.
Oh gosh.
You got to fix dinner, and you got to get the kids ready, and you got to get them to bed. And you have to walk on eggshells the whole time. You hear this story over and over and over again. And it's like, we can help. This book is not just for people who are married to narcissists, but a big part of the narcissistic process is the narcissist, usually the man, will be charming to the outside world, but to the wife, they'll demean them, they'll drive away friends, they'll drive away family, so that the only sense of self, emotional tie is to the husband. And then they'll withhold or grant affection. And these people, sometimes they come in and they can't even meet me in the eye. Their sense of self has been so destroyed. And honestly, one of the greatest feelings I have in doing this is by the end of the case, when they can look me in the eye, they're seeing, what I tell them is, let's envision your best future and let's get you there.
That's awesome. And to me, it sounds like you have so much empathy for your client, which I'm sure they appreciate. And to give them back their sense of self-worth is what it sounds like you're doing through the process.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because, so one of the things that has always disturbed me is that, let me just kind of explain. A woman will come in and say, "I can deal with this. I can put up with this." Okay. I'm doing it for the kids' sake. And I said, but listen, you got little Bobby here and he's seeing dad being verbally abusive to you. You got little Sally here and she's seeing dad you're modeling behavior for these kids. You're teaching little Bobby that it's okay to be this way to his future girlfriend or wife. You're teaching little Sally that it's okay to be abused and to not say anything about it. And then it's almost like seeing that light bulb go off and they go, oh my God, I can't do that to my kids.
No.
So Bill, when you counsel with somebody like that, and the scenario that you're describing is one that I think 99% would say is intolerable. And so the question then becomes, well, why haven't you got out of it? You want out. Why haven't you gotten out of it? And what do you see as the principal reasons, real or imagined, that people stay in that situation instead of getting out?
Well, because, and I know to people like us who know how to use the law to protect people, it sounds crazy, but for these folks, it's more comfortable to stay where they are than to venture into the unknown. Because a very common scenario is, and actually the very first, then my book is filled with vignettes. I took kind of amalgamations because I didn't want you to say, oh, that's Robin. I want you to say, oh, that's Sally. And she, but the very first one is a situation where Michael is telling his wife, if you leave me, number one, I'll take the kids. Number two, you'll be homeless. Number three, you'll never get a penny out of me. And she doesn't know. So it's a combination of being scared, and comfortable is not the right word, but it's the uncertainty about the future. Okay. And honestly, what happens a lot is that friends and family will basically stage an intervention and say, look, we have seen you going down, down, down. You're not talking to us. You're not hanging out with us. You're so sad all the time. And they'll say, you got to do something. I've even had people pay for a consultation with me, with this person, to come in and, there is sometimes physical abuse, but often the verbal abuse can be so much more destructive to your soul. So that's a big part of the reason why people don't pull the trigger on this thing.
Do you find that women who come to you are scared or are not financially independent, so they're scared of not having any money, that they have to rely on their husband?
Yes. And see, that too is part of this whole control mechanism that we see. We will work with people who come in, like a woman comes, I don't have any credit cards in my name. I don't have access to the bank account. And, and the husband's got an app on his phone where he can see if she's, gone to the bank or charged anything or whatever.
My gosh.
And they may be terrified that something like this will happen. And you think, this is 2024, but there's still a lot of people who function in that zone. And so we will work with people. A lot of times it's a third party, a parent, a friend, a relative who will pay the retainer. And then we can ask the court, to award an interim award of attorney's fees, because we'll see somebody who doesn't work, whose husband makes an enormous amount of money, but they can't scrape together the money for a retainer. And so, we'll figure out ways to make things happen.
So
that's good.
Couple of questions, which I'll get you to wear both of your hats at the same time, sort of as a bar leader and as a domestic relations lawyer. In Georgia, there is a rule of professional responsibility that prevents lawyers from taking divorce cases on a contingency basis, and I don't believe that's true throughout the United States. I think in places like Texas, you can take a contingency interest in certain collections things. Is that a good or a bad rule, do you think?
Well, I honestly think it's a bad rule. I mean, I'm not going to go out and lobby to get rid of it. But, Robin, her cases are almost probably all contingency basis. And that gives the poor people justice, the opportunity to go to court and get justice. But you get a woman, and look, sometimes the roles are reversed and it's a man, but it's usually a woman where they don't have access to the funds, and they can't envision a way in which they could. And so why not? I think if they, we could put some guardrails on it, and it might be a good way to go, and I don't know, I'm just speculating, the public policy of the state of Georgia until I guess around 1970 was to discourage divorces and actively discourage divorces. We didn't I think we got no fault divorce in 72, 73, something like that. And so I think that's probably a holdover, because since the public policy was opposed to divorce, it's probably a holdover from those days. I don't know. And there may be some brilliant legal mind watching this podcast and can send me an email and say, "You're wrong, Gentry." And that would be great. I'd love it. But I don't see a good reason for that, because Lester, you just hit the nail on the head. There can be.
You say, and I certainly realize this, but there's not really a lobby out there for changing it, because the people that are in that situation, it's sort of like I've said about tort reform stuff before, that there's no association of future victims of other people's negligence. It's people that's already happened to, so that, to me, that's a change that's worth exploring. The other thing I'll put you on the spot on is Georgia still has the right to trial by jury in a divorce case, although it seems to be less exercised. And I think the one that I got drugged back into recently was one that I had sent to a very competent divorce lawyer for an out-of-state friend. And it turned out that they may need a jury trial. And they asked me if I'd stick around, which I just kind of lurked in the background. But is that a right that's still fruitful to have in a divorce case? And if so, I know it's not widely used, but is that something that you've used or would use in a case?
Well, so it's my understanding that Texas is the only other state that permits a jury trial in any aspect of divorce. And in Georgia, it's pretty much just on the money issues. Custody will always be decided by the judge, parenting time, all that good stuff. And there are only limited issues with regard to child support, like how much income the parties have, because that can be a significant issue if you got somebody who deals in cash or whatever, taking a lot of in-kind services out of the business. I like having the option of a jury trial. I have filed jury demands in a number of cases. Look, I love the bench. I love the judges. The judges are great. But the three of us know that there's a huge variation among the Superior Court judges in the state of Georgia. And what will happen is, over time, you will see that certain judges feel a certain way about certain things. And you realize, well, maybe, for example, we've got a case where man and woman have been married for 40 years. The woman raised 5 kids. And now the husband's kicking her to the curb and she'd like some alimony. But you know that this judge will never award alimony. Or if so, it'll just be for a year or two. And you're thinking, well, this woman's 62 years old and she has no job skills. She's done a great job raising these kids. Maybe 12 people sitting in a jury box might go, you know what? We think you ought to get alimony for the rest of your life, and we'll award it and we'll set it. Or a property division, So, people will say, well, judges, they don't care about adultery, infidelity, which I know not to be completely true, but a jury might get more worked up about it and might give you a different division of property. So it's nice to have that arrow in your quiver if you need to pull it out. But yes, they're very rare.
But, I've also thought, too, that, with the jury trial in these cases of adultery, statistics would show that a good portion of your venire was probably guilty of that sin. But I've never seen a lawyer get up and say, would you raise your hand if you've ever committed adultery? Here, so we would know. So there are also certain sort of what I would just call a black box. You don't know what you're getting. And by the way, too, I think, and I'm not really talking about so much divorce cases, all cases, there's something inherently good about having a little bit of uncertainty in there, because it makes people reconsider their position and, maybe settle it. And on that note, are your settlement rates as high on divorces as they are generally civilly? it's about 99%, the statistics I've seen on civil cases generally. Are they running that high on divorce cases?
I would say you got a lot of good topics I want to jump into on what
Sure.
you just said, but I'll take the last question first. I really do think, I've tried plenty of final divorce cases, but I would say we are north of 95% in terms of divorce cases that settle. And of course, family law embraces a whole lot of other things. When I first started practicing, there were almost no legitimation cases, and now that could be 40% of our business, which is great. I love it when dads want to get involved with the kids, and I always encourage the moms, get this guy involved because number one, it'll make sure he's paying child support, which you
Child
need,
support.
and number two, this kid's going to be better rounded if dad is involved in the kid's life. Now you talked about, what I tell my clients is, look, if we have Judge Smith, for example, and I know like you got 6 or 8 Judge Smiths on the Superior Court bench in Bartow, but your outcome range of outcomes is like this, but you do a jury trial and my arms don't even go far enough apart to embrace all the different possibilities. And so I try to tell, and plus it's more expensive. You got to strike a jury. You got all the other issues of evidentiary issues that the judge can deal with. But with a jury, you got to send the jury out to, ask about, get resolution of certain jury evidentiary issues and so forth. So anyway, did I answer your question?
I think so, and I think that, when I used to do domestic, I got tired of knowing what the judge was going to do, before I got over there. And I finally just started taking cases that wanted a jury trial, for a little while. But one of the things that amazed me, I think I tried like about 4 divorce jury trials in my 100 or so that I've had. And up here in Bartow, they would give you the form of the verdict, literally said, "We, the jury, find," and it was a blank sheet of paper, and they would send it out. And what you had to do was, get a black, this was before PowerPoint. I don't think I've tried a domestic case in the age of PowerPoint, but you had to get a blackboard or whiteboard or poster or something up there and say, we want you to give us half of the property at 201 Main Street, or whatever, or give them the Main Street property and give us the Spruce Street property, But the juries did a pretty amazing job with it, and I had one where I tried it, and they came back with somewhere between what the last offer and the last demand was, even though they didn't know what that was,
Yeah. Yeah.
Bill, I would also think because you've tried so many jury trials, that would give you an edge, knowing that in the end, you can always get a jury trial and you've probably tried way more than your opponent. I would think you're thinking that gives us an edge.
Right. I haven't tried as many jury trials as Lester has, or probably as you have, but I've probably had 35 or 40 jury trials over the years. And when you recognize, but I go up against family law lawyers who've never tried a single jury trial. And the prospect scares the devil out of them. So you file a jury demand, that's gonna tilt things right there.
Yeah, I would think in your favor, your client's favor. So when you're doing a jury trial, that's mainly going to be about bank accounts or the house, or maybe if there's a family business owned. But just to make sure, custody, that is not a jury. That's a judge decision, right?
Never a jury. I had a case probably 25 years ago, and my client, we showed up ready to try the case, and in front of Judge Staley Clark, who is a tremendous judge. She's taken senior status, and my client says, "Oh, I want to do something completely different." And I said, "Oh crap, I don't have time to do all of this stuff differently. I mean, we're here, we're ready to go." And so I filed a jury demand, and Judge Staley Clark, to her credit, said, "Great, we'll pull those issues off and try them another time. But let's go ahead and try the custody issues right now." Okay. And so, we ended up settling because my client had gone in a completely different direction on the morning of trial. But yeah, that's just an illustration. But yeah, judges will always do those issues.
Do you have a thought, and a lot of, in fact, I know a lot of lawyers, maybe even including myself, who don't really want to be judges because there's general jurisdiction in Georgia with the Superior Court judges, whereas a lot of states like South Carolina, where I went to law school, they've got a separate family court that just deals with domestic relations. And I guess some of the Superior Court benches, take turns, it seems like, setting people up. But is that something you think we need, a family court that's separate? Because like juvenile court, for example, is, a specialty court that deals with a lot of the same kinds of issues, that Superior Court judges do in domestic relation cases. Is that something that you think is needed or would be helpful to Georgians in general?
Well, Fulton kind of does that. They have, I think, 3 judges assigned to the family law division, but so much of their work gets done by judicial officers. So I don't want to go too far down that route. In a smaller county where there's only 1 or 2 Superior Court judges, you like you were saying earlier, you kind of know what the judge is going to do, which helps you settle. And that benefits the client if you can say, look, Judge Smith is going to do this. Are you sure you don't want to go ahead and settle now? Okay. When you have a jurisdiction like Cobb, we've got 11 Superior Court judges. I think Fulton has 16, if I'm not wrong. And of course, you don't know which one may get a particular case. The variability creates the uncertainty that you were talking about before, which a skilled lawyer can kind of use to your benefit. If you don't know which way the case is going to go, the other side is kind of skittish, you can use it to your benefit. Now, ultimately, would having a bench filled with domestic relations lawyers are probably going to be the ones who populate your family law court if you had something like that. I think there'd be a lot of benefits, maybe some things not so great, but I'd be happy to explore that with anybody who's interested in doing it. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other.
Talking a lot about when a divorce settles, mediation has become big in my cases. Like we mediate almost every case. Hopefully it will resolve at mediation, but not always. I try a lot of cases that fail to resolve at mediation. Do you have mediation in divorce cases?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's been a great development. Really, about 30 years ago, mediation kind of as a wave came across Metro Atlanta. Pretty much we practice throughout Metro Atlanta, all the counties, and they all have a mediation requirement. Now, when it goes to mediation, it varies from county to county, but there's good things and there's bad things. I mean, it used to be, you represent somebody in a divorce case, you pick up the phone, talk to the other lawyer, and 50, 60, 70% of the time you get things worked out. Mediation kind of made people not do that anymore. You kind of just wait for mediation to happen, and the better lawyers will do a good bit of prep work beforehand, get their clients pre-positioned so they're ready to go, and they get to mediation. And, you probably see 75, 80% of divorce cases settle either at mediation, or you narrow the issues down to like this. And then within a week or 2 after that, go, we'll give on this if you'll give on, and you're done, which is great.
Yeah. And what about, do you ever encourage marriage counseling? Does that happen, or is that in movies?
Well, it does happen, and that's interesting because because of all the questions on the outline that you gave me of things to think about, that was the one that really I struggled with, and I talked to the other lawyers in the firm, because most of the time, by the time somebody's fanny hits the seat over here in my office, it's beyond counsel. Or if you got a scenario where there's a narcissist, they will not go to counseling because they will never share control with a counselor who will tell them how to act. But I have had people come in, and as if I can hear the love in their voice for their spouse, and I'm not hearing a lot of abusive conduct, I'll say, have you thought about counseling? I would say probably 1 in 100 people who comes in and hires us to start a divorce will say, stop, we're going to give it another shot. And I will always say at that point, get counseling. Don't try to do this on your own. but probably 75% of those who go will come back. It will not work out. So I hope I answered your question. My
Yeah,
dad,
I can definitely see that. By the time they've decided to get up the courage to walk to your office, make an appointment with you, and sit down with you, it's over. They want your help to, as your book says, to get out. They've made that decision. I definitely understand that. It's like when a injured person comes to my office, they're not really. They're wanting me to take the case and get going. They're not really thinking about it anymore. They're like, let's go. So I would assume that's the same.
Always, but they do always, Robin, put the thing in, and I'm sure Bill gets this too. But we've got this conference room office, and it's got a paneled thing, and I tell people, because it happens almost every time, if I had a piece of chalk and I could make a little chalk mark for somebody comes in and they're ready to file, a civil lawsuit, usually a med mal or products car wreck case, whatever, and they say, I'm really not the suing kind. Which they've been convinced by society over the years that, there's a suing kind of person that they, is really undesirable to go into court and actually vindicate your rights. And I'm sure they're, I'm just not the divorcing kind, Mr. Gentry. There have been, that's not something that my family, we ever did before. I'm sure you hear that a bunch too.
Well, we do. And it's well, but the thing about it is, in a divorce case, whether you work out every issue or whether you try every issue to the judge, there has to be a divorce case filed. There has to be a final judgment entered. With what you guys see otherwise, I know not many med mal cases settle pre-suit, but some do, I guess. And Lester, with the cases that you have, some, you cannot settle a divorce case and get it resolved without having to file a lawsuit. So, but Robin, you'd said something a minute ago, and I want to kind of come back to that about the whole marital counseling and all of that stuff. I have a lot. I think nationally about 2/3 of divorce cases are initiated by women, and that's what I've seen in our practice as well. A lot of guys will come in, because I do represent men as well, and they'll say, well, I'm convinced my wife's going to change your mind. And what I've seen is, what? This is typically in a woman's mind, when this decision is made, it's a toggle switch, and it ain't going back on. It's off. Okay. In the guy's mind, it's a dimmer switch. You can go a little bit like, no, she's made the decision. Almost never will a woman change her mind and say, I've changed my mind, but occasionally, but almost never.
Yeah. Very interesting. I mentioned, we've talked a little bit about this and the use of experts in your cases, that you really focus on what we call high asset divorce. Can you give our listeners an idea of what that means?
Yeah, occasionally you'll have both spouses making high income, but people who have multiple millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, some professional athletes, that's really, but look, I don't want to deter anyone who wants to give us a call, because we've got a number of different lawyers here, but really, the most common scenario is the man may make $500,000 or $1 million a year. The woman may be a stay-at-home mom or have a job, maybe at church, working with the children's programs, making $30,000 a year. So there's a huge kind of imbalance of incomes. And that's a pretty common scenario that we see.
Do you ever, well, let me ask you this. Do you see an uptick in the use of social media involved in your divorce cases? And how does that play out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I really strongly discourage people from putting anything on social media about their divorce, or really just stop posting for a while.
Yeah.
We had somebody who was an influencer, and telling her to stop doing that was, it's like, cut off my hands, because I'm going to do it, but yeah.
For what you advise her, she's going to do it.
Oh, yeah. Now, I had a guy who he had settled a workers' comp case. And so he decided to strip down to his camo BVDs and throw all the cash in his settlement on his bed and roll around, take pictures and put it on Facebook. And guess what? the mother of his child decided it was time to go back for more child support.
Oh, oops.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we see even in personal injury cases, that's one of the first things that the defense asks in discovery is they name social media platforms I'm not even familiar with, but they want everything your clients ever posted about anything, hoping they'll find your client, on a four-wheeler out in the mud having fun when they say they're injured. So
I think social media has turned every computer owner. They think they're damn Sherlock Holmes now. They're going to solve some mystery murder someplace, or they're going to find that silver bullet for whatever case they know about out there, especially if it's their own.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I use AirTags now in my luggage when I travel, and I have found it's amazing to me because it lets me know exactly where my bag is. I haven't lost a bag since then, or the airlines haven't. I have seen private investigators use AirTags to try to locate people or help them do surveillance. I'm wondering, do you see that in your cases where they use AirTags, or private investigators use kind of GPS to locate a person? Maybe they're having an affair or something like that.
Well, private investigators, I think, are overused, because unless you can say, I want you to be at the motel Friday night at 7:00 and be watching out for my husband and his girlfriend or whatever, you're going to spend a lot of money and probably get nothing out of it. Now, I have had those videos when you've got, husband and girlfriend arm in arm kissing. And of course, that always helps. But AirTags are, because we just had a nice trip to Italy and my wife had AirTags and everything. She said, oh, yeah, I got to change the battery on this one. But, pretty much if it's a marriage, okay, and the car is titled in either one of the spouse's names, I pretty much think you got the right to put an AirTag in it. Now, if it's the girlfriend, you don't have the right to put an AirTag in her car to track her around, because, there's no legal or equitable title to that car. But yeah, we do see that more and more. I will tell you, the first time I had that happen was 15 years ago, where I was representing a mother against the father. They were not married, and he put his cell phone in her car, and it was tracking the cell phone. And the judge just blew a gasket, really angry at him, because he had no, ownership interest in that vehicle. So there are a whole bunch of other things happened with that case, and that guy ended up in prison, which is where he belonged. But yeah.
So do you get a lot of and where obviously the more salacious details are the more interesting sometimes, in cases. But with the adultery cases that you have, one of the things I remember from 30 years ago when I did some divorce cases was there were a lot of folks who really felt like they were entitled to punitive damages, for an adultery case. And a lot of times you could argue that in front of a jury, and, you would argue that, oh, well, this marriage was already over, and, this is a symptom, not a cause. And I think at least back then, I think there was a jury charge on that, or, something to that effect. How do you see that play out, and how do you handle that with a spouse who, from all, most folks would say, yeah, they've been wronged, in some way, but maybe it is or isn't the breakup of the cause of the breakup of the marriage.
Well, when I'm representing the person who committed the indiscretion, my approach is, number one, be honest, put it out there. Look, it's still a crime to commit adultery in Georgia, but nobody gets prosecuted for it. So admit it. Okay. And then number two, let's build the narrative around that. It's typically the man, and, well, my wife hasn't had sex with me in 4 years. Well, maybe that is, it's not justification, but it might be mitigation. Okay. And she's going to say, because he hadn't taken a bath in 4 years. Okay, well, but anyway, if you can lessen the impact, that's what I would focus on in that scenario.
Well, you mentioned your wife, Bill, and I know you have a wonderful wife, Sherry, and y'all have been married how many years?
37.
37. So your marriage obviously is a testament to a great union between the two of you, and you're just both lovely people and a lovely couple. And I think your own marriage is a testament that marriages can be great, but when they're not, here's an avenue. Hire Bill, and here's an avenue to get out.
And you can get this book online.
All right. I was going to say you can get it on Amazon, and I guess wherever you get your books online, you can buy it.
Barnes and Noble, yeah.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble.
And it's amazing.
Yeah, so,
I mean, we've sold e-editions, electronic editions, which you can get and, look at your Kindle or whatever, in Europe, in Asia. It's like,
wow.
It's written for people in Georgia, but people all over the country have been ordering copies. I think a lot of people, women can feel ashamed and they can feel alone in a situation like this. And by telling 10 or 12 vignettes, little stories about other people, they can really, I've had people, come in and say, I'm chapter 8. You go, okay, which one is that?
I love that. It's really helps them approach it. And it really is a very, very nice book. And I wanted to ask you, Bill, before we go into the next thing, why did you decide to do this? I've always wanted to write a book, never have, but I just love that you've done this.
Well, I've heard the story so many times, and there's only so many people I can help, or the lawyers in my office can help. And I thought, I want to take this message to a wider audience. I want other folks to hear that there's a better future out there. And whether it's with me or whether it's with somebody else, start looking at that better future, start crafting the better future for yourself and for your kids. And I just really feel like, I tell people, especially if they've really been married to a hardcore narcissist, I want you to come back to me 2, 3, 4, 5 years and tell me how your life's going. And without exception, when that happens, it's really good. I talked with a woman yesterday, and she told me the same thing, how great it is for her and her 2 daughters.
That's awesome. That's as much as you can ask for. I think that's fantastic.
Well, you guys change lives too. And I think that's what we do as lawyers. That's what we should do as lawyers, is help change people's lives for the better.
I totally agree. And with us, I feel like we become family members with our clients, and I belong to so many other families now, but it's really it's a lovely relationship. Bill, we always end with asking our guest your definition of justice. So I put that question to you. How do you define justice?
Well, there's a story I love to share that my pastor friend Tom Davis told me. And he says, justice is when you're driving down the highway 15 miles an hour over the speed limit and the trooper pulls you over and gives you a ticket. That's justice. Mercy is the trooper pulls you over and just gives you a warning. And grace is when the trooper pulls you over and gives you 2 Super Bowl tickets. But really, justice to me is a resolution that's fair to all involved, including the children in family law cases, because judges and really us as lawyers are charged with looking out for the best interest of the children in family law cases, because they really, it's so easy when a husband and wife or 2 spouses are just beating on each other for the kids to be forgotten. And that's the way I look at justice. Is it fair to the kids too?
Great answer. That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you, Bill. We've really enjoyed our time with you. And to our listeners, again, I want to remind you, we've been talking with Bill Gentry of the Gentry Law Firm. You may learn more about Bill at his firm's website, gentrylawfirmgeorgia.com, and check out his new book, I Want Out, A Woman's Guide to Finding Peace Through Divorce, which, as we said, you can purchase on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Wherever you get your books, you can find his book. Bill, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Lester. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, Listeners, this is the time when Lester and I get to share with you an item we've seen in the news, law related, that we think you might find interesting or may raise some questions, or maybe it's just amusing to you. So, Lester, what do you have for our listeners?
Well, I'm going to set a record today, Robin, because usually a news item has already been reported in the newspaper, in the on the television, the radio, whatever else. But just this morning, the day of our podcast, the podcast recording, the Supreme Court issued an opinion in Steele versus the state. And you may have been following the so-called young thug, or the YSL trial that's been going on. You remember that Brian Steele, who's a well-known criminal defense lawyer here in town, was held in contempt by the judge when he asked the judge about an ex parte meeting that took place, and the judge demanded to know how he knew that. He held Steele in contempt, sentenced him to 20 days in jail. There was a pretty general uprising, I think, about that amongst lawyers in general, and also especially criminal defense lawyers. And so that case went up on appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph of that opinion, which overturned the finding of contempt. It says, a trial court found attorney Brian Steele in contempt of court for refusing to tell the court how he learned about the court's ex parte hearing with a witness and prosecutors in the case. Steele appeals from the contempt order, arguing that the evidence didn't support the contempt finding, that he didn't interfere with the court's administration of justice. His information was protected by attorney-client privilege. The court held, and I read, because of the delayed punishment and alleged disobedience was directed toward the court, and the court was involved in the controversy that formed the basis of the contempt, due process required the judge to recuse from the contempt proceeding. We therefore reverse the judgment imposed by the trial court. So that decision, I think, surprises absolutely no seasoned trial lawyer or trial judge who is familiar with contempt processes, in that if you're the judge and you are going to be a witness in the case, or could be called as a witness in the case, and in fact, even if there's just a delay in the proceedings, you have to bring in another judge, because it's basic due process. You know, a judge who's his own judge is no judge at all. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not surprised about that in that sense. Maybe it's not news, but I think it's something that was followed very closely, really not just by the legal community, but at large, because that trial has been a centerpiece. And of course, that judge has now been recused and from the trial as a whole. And our friend and fellow Lawyers Club member, Paige Reese Whitaker, is now presiding over that case. But yeah, that is again, the first time on See You in Court that we've delivered breaking news
awesome.
To our listeners.
Yeah, I love that. And I do remember when that happened. And one thing I loved about what happened is that the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, GACTL, when this happened, they put together a group of people who went down to the courthouse and stood in front of the line for Mr. Steele and argued the case, argued the contempt.
Yeah, I guess, too, I didn't really think about it, but in the interest of full disclosure, I probably should say I actually gave them an affidavit, having represented judges and represented lawyers in contempt proceedings before. I actually did give them an affidavit for those folks. They called me and asked me about it. And they seemed to think I was an expert in judicial ethics. I don't know if that was true, but
I would say you are, given the number of judges you've represented. I would call you an expert. But also it's not really even I don't think it's really even a close call. You know. Yeah, I didn't think that particular event was a close call. But even GACTL lawyers down there arguing sort of admitted that no one really knows the step 1, 2, 3, 4 of how to do a contempt hearing. It's something that everyone probably gets wrong whenever it happens. Thank God I've never had to be involved in one.
I believe, Robin, you and I did a CLE with Chief Justice Boggs several years ago, who had been a trial judge. And I said, there doesn't seem like there's a lot of judges that really actually know the different kinds of contempt. And he says, yeah, I think you're right about that. But basically, if you jump up in the middle of court and say, that witness is a liar and you're disrupting the proceedings, the judge can say, Mr. Bad Boy, I'm finding you in contempt and, sentencing you to 24 hours in jail or whatever. But if it involves things that happen outside the immediate presence of the court and are disruptive, then you've got to bring in another judge, particularly if the trial judge is involved in it.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept, and it's something that I think lawyers and no lawyer wants to have a judge say, I'm going to hold you in contempt. And I really don't think most judges want to hold anybody in contempt for things like this. But it comes up rarely, and it usually comes up when, how should I say this, when lawyers and judges are in sort of the heat of battle, and it's really easy to make a mistake about. It just is.
I would say, as you said, no one would be surprised that the Supreme Court reversed that decision. So I agree. I would also add that anytime Brian Steele's involved in an issue like that, my money's on Brian Steele.
Yeah, he did a great job with it. And one of the issues that came up there was that we should probably do a whole podcast on that trial. If it ever gets over, we may have to be doing a halftime show for it. But one of the things is it's perfectly appropriate in some instances for a judge to have an ex parte meeting. But what's never appropriate is to not disclose that to the other side, that it's actually taken place. And it's, if you watch the video of that, the judge was saying, you're not even supposed to know about this meeting. And, that's just not accurate under the canons.
Yeah.
The judicial canons.
Not only is it not accurate under the canons of judicial, what is it called? Judicial conduct.
Code of judicial conduct is really what they call them, canons. Canons. I don't know why we bring artillery into the.
It doesn't sound right. And for the public to be watching and they hear that, it doesn't give the public a lot of confidence in fairness. And that's to me, my concern is a lot of eyes are watching that trial and they probably think, oh, that's not fair. And I that's what I didn't like. So that's been reversed by the Georgia Supreme Court this morning, which is great. We're going to continue on a judge theme here, Mr.
All
Judge
right.
Expert. And mine deals with a judge in Bergen County, New Jersey, Judge Gary N. Wilcox, who during COVID decided he might start lip syncing to TikTok videos and music. And he went by the alias on TikTok of Sal Tortorella. And he would replay song segments and he lip synced to them and then posted them as his own videos on TikTok. Well, he got a little out of control with it and started doing more and more and started showing himself in his judge's robe in chambers doing TikToks. And then once in his bedroom where he was not fully clothed, and he got a little
both robed and disrobed.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, bad decision, Judge, bad decision. In one video, Judge Wilcox recorded himself walking in the courthouse while the song Get Down by rapper Nas played in the background. According to the ethics complaint, the song contains explicit lyrics concerning a criminal case and a courtroom shooting, as well as derogatory and discriminatory terms, drug and gang references, and the killing of a doctor in a hospital who treated another gang member. and he lip synced to that song in his robe in chambers. And the Ethics Commission of New Jersey just didn't think that was appropriate, and he got an unpaid 3-month suspension for the lip syncing TikTok videos. And he did not fight the 3-month suspension. He said, okay, the court has spoken, so I'm just going to accept that. I think that's at least 3 months is appropriate for that. But the point is, you can't.
He might be able to get a TV judgeship,
Yeah.
in the meantime there too.
That's true. The court found that he had violated ethics rules requiring judges to observe high standards of integrity, to avoid the appearance of impropriety, and to conduct extrajudicial activities in a way that does not demean the judicial office. So I think the judge has probably learned his lesson with that 3-month suspension, but I could definitely see our Supreme Court finding the exact same way. You can't have a judge behaving like that.
No, it's interesting. So, I'm the accidental judge's lawyer because, ended up being on chair in judicial qualifications.
Yeah.
So I was actually on one of the rewrites of the rules committee that right when social media was emerging,
Yeah.
10 years ago or 12 years ago or whatever. And there was discussion about whether judges in the state of Georgia just ought to be banned, basically from social media. And the problem with that is they have to run for re-election. And so, it's not fair to tie their hands, with that. But the bottom line was that, and we ended up, it's not a violation. And I've represented judges who've had accusations related to what they did on social media. But the bottom line in the discussion was, if it's improper to do something and you do it on social media, then it's just evidence that you did something improper. It's not because it's on social media. And so you take bebopping into the courthouse, where somebody's case has been, is being heard, somebody's liberty is there.
Yeah.
Just it's the act of doing that, not necessarily the fact that it was on social media.
Right.
I was sure when you mentioned you had a judge when, Robin, knowing you're from the Bluegrass State, that it was going to be about the sheriff who is charged with shooting the judge in his chambers there. That's one we could probably do a whole show on too.
We could, and I have several friends who practice law up there in Kentucky, and wow, that is just an incident that really has rocked the whole judiciary in Kentucky. It's unbelievable, and I'm sure as time goes on, more facts will come out. Never seen anything like. I mean, this on video. They've got video of him shooting the judge.
Not safe for work video either. I mean,
it's not, and it's not a whodunit. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we may come back to that. I'm sure a lot's going to be going on with that case. I just don't want any of our judges to be in harm's way. I'll just say,
no, absolutely not, and
never appropriate.
And frankly, one of the things that's so shocking about that is that the sheriff is in charge of the security,
of the safety,
safety of the judges in the courthouse there.
Yeah, ridiculous. Well, also, before we leave social media real quick, I wanted to say that we have had as a guest Judge Steve Dillard from the Georgia Court of Appeals, and he is on Twitter. He's in fact, they've called him the Twitter laureate. I think Judge Dillard is an example of judges doing social media correctly.
I do too.
And appropriately. So
he's actually got, I think with a appellate judge from another state, a paper presentation about using social media in an appropriate way for judges.
Yeah.
So it's always a great yes today. I felt like we had a very lively discussion and lots of interesting things to talk about in the law here.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I have, Lester. So until next time, we'll see you in court.
You've been listening to the See You in Court podcast, brought to you by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. Remember, justice is a shared journey, and your engagement makes all the difference. For further insight and resources, visit our website at www.seeyouincourtpodcast.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at See You in Court Podcast for additional content. And don't forget to engage with our community on facebook.com/seeyouincourtpodcast. Special thanks to our producer, Philip Hoover. I'm Fred Smith, Executive Director of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. You may learn more about the foundation at www.fairplay.org. Until next time, we'll see you in court.